This lesson's topic is euthanasia, which is a controversial ethical issue. And there's quite a bit to say about it. And if you do the reading in the chapter and read it closely, you'll see there's a lot of different kinds of things that are called euthanasia. Now, the word itself comes from Greek words that mean a good death. Now, that's telling because a lot of times when we think about euthanasia, we think that someone is in a situation physically, typically, in which their life is of such a quality that it seems as if, from the point of view of someone who would be in favor of euthanasia, that this person would be better off if their life were ended. And there's various ways this can take place. It could be active on the part of someone else. It could be active on the part of the person who's suffering. It could be through inactivity, as in letting someone die, pulling the plug on them, removing a feeding tube, or something of that nature. So there's various things that can happen. And a lot of what this chapter is taken up with, besides the ethical issues, is just getting clear on all the different kinds of euthanasia. Now, on the page is noted, and in a couple of places, these distinctions are spelled out in chart form. But you have passive euthanasia, where you stop or don't start some treatment which allows a person to die. And the actual illness that the person has is what results in their death, rather than anything that you actively do. And this is contrasted, of course, with active euthanasia, where something is actually done to cause the death. Some drug is administered either by the person themselves or by someone else. There's voluntary euthanasia, where it's the person's choice. The person who's ill or suffering chooses to end their life, freely and knowingly do so. There's non-voluntary euthanasia, where the person does not give their consent in some way, either because they're in a coma or they're in some kind of state in which they can't give an answer. Now, in voluntary euthanasia, the person could have given consent ahead of time. They could be in a coma or in some persistent vegetative state, and they've given permission ahead of time through an advance directive of some sort, a living will, it's often called, that it would be okay for someone to end their life. And then finally, there's physician-assisted suicide, which can overlap any of these, and it's typically the case, and in many states in the United States, I think at last count there were 6 or 7. I would have to check again, and you're welcome to do so. But the doctor prescribes some drugs, but the person takes the drugs themselves. So this is a form of active voluntary euthanasia, but it is put into this separate category because it has become so well known. And so these things can be grouped into various categories beyond this. Like I said, there's a chart that's later on from this list in this section of the chapter, so that they can be combined in various ways. But again, it's not just one thing when we're talking about euthanasia. A lot of people, when they think about it, think about someone actively ending someone's life, but there's a lot of different forms that euthanasia can take. Now, as far as moral judgments, we can make consequentialist judgments, like from a utilitarian perspective, and that's typically what's done, that there's a calculation done that this person is suffering so much that ending their suffering would make them their life better, and they may think that themselves, and maybe from a point of view of ethical considerations for their own self-interest, ethical egoist considerations, if you will, they might make this decision. And there's various ways these arguments can go, depending on the kind of euthanasia you're talking about, and a lot of these considerations are mentioned. In terms of non-consequentialist or deontological arguments, these would be the duty-based, perhaps, or maybe natural law type arguments. We could consider that, what are the sorts of rules that this sort of thing may fall under? Does the person have the free will in the situation. Are they making the conscious decision and making a rational decision themselves to do this? And again, there's the question of like, what rules are we following here? Are we following rules that can be universalized so that everyone can follow them? Are we following rules that respect the humanity of human beings? And again, these are the things to consider. I'm not giving you the arguments or giving you any answers here. Also, from a non-consequentialist virtue perspective, we may think of things like mercy and compassion. We also may think of the care ethics idea on this, that we should treat people compassionately, and whether that would require letting them die or helping them to die is an open question, but that's the philosophical, ethical question, and one of them you would have to address. So this has been a very brief overview of the topic of euthanasia. The chapter is there for you to read, and of course we have a discussion this week over this topic.